Hello, my name is Reggie Chapman. I use he, him pronouns. I am the Director of Policy at the Fortune Society's David Rothenberg Center for Public Policy. Welcome to Both Sides of the Bars, which is a discussion driven show that examines the criminal legal system from various perspectives, including people most impacted by the system. Here we discuss critical questions about how the criminal legal system works, its intersections with social justice, and the efforts that advocates are making to improve the lives of everyone affected. We ask that you, the viewers, spread the word about both sides of the bars and share your comments with us on Twitter, also known as X at the Fortune SOC. Today's show is titled Both Sides of the Bars Year in Review. In today's show, we will look back at the criminal legal policy shifts across New York State over the last 2 years and what they mean going forward. We will explore how the state can move forward toward these approaches and reduce the reliance on incarceration, strengthen public safety, and better support communities. Furthermore, with New York City's new administration, there is renewed chances to transform the system through investments that address illness, poverty, and instability, which will build and help sustain a healthy future for our communities. In this episode, we feature a person who's been a pioneer in the movement for decades, the Fortune Society's president and CEO, Stanley Richards. Stanley is a nationally recognized leader in reentry and justice reform. His leadership continues to drive Fortune's mission to reduce incarceration, strengthen communities, and promote dignity for people impacted by the criminal legal system. Good afternoon, Stanley. We're excited to have you here on the Both Sides of the Bars Year in Review.
Thank you for having me, Reggie. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. And we're excited as well. We're here to discuss with you. So there's so many things going on over the past 2 years concerning criminal legal system policy. And so we want to just kind of discuss these things and talk about your perspectives concerning this and what we can do moving forward. And so I guess without any further ado, I'd like to jump into the first question.
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. So again, the last 2 years has brought several major policy wins, such as New York State's Clean Slate Act, the New York City Fair Chance for Housing Act, and local law intro 1100, Jail is Not a Home. From your perspective, what groundwork or advocate strategies were most critical in getting those reforms across the finish line?
Well, first, before I get into that question, I just want to take a moment to just look at what I call stones of remembrance. And it's a way for me to remind myself of where we came from and where we're at, and to see the kind of progress we've made as a city and as a state over decades of calling for criminal legal reform. So let's put it in perspective. As a formerly incarcerated man, I came home from prison in 1991. When I was incarcerated in New York State, we had over 72,000 people incarcerated in New York State prisons. We had over 22,000 people incarcerated in New York City jails. We have come a long way from that day. Today, we have about 33,000 people in New York State prisons. We've closed 12 prisons already. And while we've seen the number of people incarcerated in our jails go up, we are at slightly over 7,000, down from 22,000. So we have made progress as a collective organizing body, as a service provider body, as multiple administrations. We have made progress. And I look forward to this new administration coming in and making even more progress, because the time to act is right now. We see in New York City jails, over 50% of the people in our jails have diagnosed with mental illness. A subset of that is diagnosed with serious mental illness. We see at Fortune, 25% of the people who walk through our doors are unstably housed. So we see mental health, homelessness, substance abuse, lack of access to economic opportunities, all being drivers that we need to address. Now, the secret sauce for Fortune, in terms of how we collaborate and partner with people, is that Fortune doesn't take on a policy issue if the policy issue isn't driven by the people we serve. We hear the stories and see the trauma of the system that impacts so many people from poor communities, Black and brown communities, We take what we hear and we see and we elevate that to a policy platform. Then we go out and we seek common ground with partners so that we have a collective voice about what impacts the people that we serve.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. I mean, you said several things that were very, very compelling. Two of which I want to like harken back to. One is that the time is now, and I truly believe that when we think about the current social condition throughout our nation in New York City and throughout our nation, you also talked about the partnering up with other organization. As a director of policy here, I know that very well. I understand that oftentimes you talk about not working in silos, and you talk about our collective ecosystem when we're together we can do more together than apart. And so I just appreciate that perspective, Mr. Richards. And I
Mhm.
hope that everyone will understand that we get more work done together as opposed to apart. So I really appreciate that perspective.
That's right. And yeah,
So
including our government partners. Yeah.
absolutely. So on to another question I have for you. And you mentioned it earlier. We talked about the new administration. So with New York City's new administration coming in, where do you see the strongest opportunities to advance policies that tackle poverty, illness, and mass incarceration?
So let me just say this: mass incarceration has multiple starting points. As you said, it intersects with poverty, it intersects with education, it intersects with homelessness and housing, mental health, substance abuse. There's a number of drivers when you talk about mass incarceration. I think what brings me the most hope is that this incoming administration gives us an opportunity to start in a different place. We've had administrations where we had to try to convince them that by addressing homelessness and substance use and mental illness and economic opportunity, jobs and education was a pathway to public safety, including policing and all the other elements, that you can't do one without doing all the others. And I think with this incoming administration, we don't have to convince them that we need to be pulling every lever to try to bring about the systemic and community change that we need to see in regards to public safety. So I think there is this opportunity that we start in a different place. The second thing I think that brings hope is that this incoming administration understands that it's going to take a sustained investment to bring about the sustained change we want to see and reducing our footprint in mass incarceration, providing housing stability for people who are impacted by the criminal legal system, providing job and training opportunities for people who are impacted by the criminal legal system. It is not going to happen by investing a nickel in a problem that you need to invest a dollar in. And so I think we are going to have an opportunity to talk to this administration and the new city council leadership about when you think about public safety, you have to think about every lever of the ecosystem and you have to make the investments equal to the size of the challenge that we face. So investing in nonprofits, like you invest in corrections and policing, invest in the sort of ecosystem of providers to ensure that people have no wrong door for access, that people have the resources and supports they need to turn their life around. And so I am very, very hopeful with this incoming administration that we're going to be starting in a different place. And they deeply understand the kind of investments that this administration is going to need to make in order for us to close Rikers, reduce the footprint, and increase community stability and public safety.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. So again, you said several things that I think are super duper important, but two things in which I want to highlight. When you talked about this new administration, the starting point, and not having to convince them to do the work, I think that's very, very important for people to understand because oftentimes, if you don't have the right administration, like you said, you have to put so much energy into convincing them to do things that actually takes away resources and opportunities that you could be using to actually do the work. So I just want to highlight that, and I think that's important for people that are looking from the outside in to see the work in which Fortune is doing, our community partners is doing in the entire New York State. So thank you for
Mhm.
that. You also talked about like these different levers of the ecosystem and how to address it. And when you made that statement, it kind of made me think about this idea. And you mentioned community safety and public safety. It made me think about not only looking at it as a public safety issue and a community safety issue, but also looking at it as a public health issue. Because as you said, most of these things such as housing, employment, mental health care, physical health care, job training, and which we do at Fortune, we provide all these. These are the social determinants of health that either drive and or reduce rates of incarceration and or just the rising of the of the incarcerated population. So I just want to highlight that for our viewers because I think that was something you touched on as well.
Yes, yes. You can't um, think about only addressing one element of a system. Mass incarceration, as I said, has many drivers. And I said them, it's education, it's poverty, it's economic opportunity, it's homelessness, it's mental illness, it's substance use. You have to be willing to invest and address them all. And as a country, we have not done that. We have uh, committed to increasing punishment without investing in prevention, without investing in reentry and rebuilding. And so we find ourselves over the decades with millions of people impacted uh, by the criminal legal system, and they're struggling. Their families are struggling, and their communities are struggling. Yet you see where we make the investment. We make the investment on policing, we make the investment on corrections, but we don't make those similar investments on reentry and support people need when they have successfully finished their time.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. And I think that's so very, very important. I'm so happy that you're able to capture that this idea of investments and prevention, right? Because the work that we do is actually it works in two ways. It works in tandem that it actually addresses the problem in real time, and it also works in a way that over time it actually prevents further harm in the future. So I think that's important to highlight that others, us and others as well, they continue to do work that not only addresses the issue that are before us, but prevent issues in the future. So I very much appreciate that perspective, Mr. Richards.
Yeah, it is. This work is generational work. And I look at my own example, my own family. You know, I went to prison. My younger sister went to prison. My younger brother went to prison. And when I came home from prison, and fortune gave me an opportunity to turn my life around, to give back, it changed generations in my family. I have four grown kids. My oldest son, unfortunately, went to jail early on in his young adult life, but since has turned his life around. I have four kids who are not in the system. They have children, they're working, they're living on their own. I broke the cycle of incarceration that I went through, my brother went through, my sister went through for my family. And so the investment we're talking about, when we talk about supporting people reentering from incarceration and really focusing on prevention, we're talking about generational work. We're talking about public safety in a whole deeper way than just safe communities. We're talking about safe and thriving generations of families who had a family member impacted by the criminal legal system. And we can do it, particularly here in New York. New York is used to doing big things, and I am confident that with the right leadership, New York can continue to do the things that we've been doing to reduce our reliance on mass incarceration and giving people a fair shot to rebuild their lives and turn their lives around.
That was great. Again, so much more to unpack. Again, so you just said something again that was very, very, very important. Like we're not just about like public safety in the sense of like reducing or preventing crime. We're talking about investing in people and investing in society so that we make things better. And so again, I appreciate that perspective. That's something that I think that is unique to the work that Fortune and a lot of his coalition partners do. And so I just want to highlight that for our viewers. It's more than just prevention and crime and
That's
reducing
right.
recidivism rates. It's actually also about improving society. And so this is why I appreciate the work that we do. And I also want to say to you, Mr. Richards, you talked about being a beacon of hope and example for your family and changing, the trajectory
Mhm.
of your generation around. But I just want to say, you also do that for people who come from that same space who admire you, individuals such as myself. And so you do that for us. And so
Thank
it's
you.
existential in that I can be inspired by you, perform in the same way, and inspire my family as well.
That's right. And that's the Fortune model, right? Over 50% of our staff are people impacted by the criminal legal system or in recovery. Um, 40% of our executive team is people impacted by the criminal legal system or in recovery. And so we are an organization that we describe ourselves as an organization that walks to talk. When you see us, you see lived experience. You see the diversity of our experience, the professionalism that we bring, and the unwavering commitment to bring light on an issue that have been living in the dark for far too long. And in this country and in this city, we need to be the shining light on the hill. And we can be that, but we need to make sure that our system is not defined as a criminal legal system, but a criminal justice system. That it has justice for those who have been harmed. It has justice for those who have caused harm. It has justice for the communities that they come from. And that is public safety.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. We appreciate that. So I want to transition to our next question. So, despite recent victories, communities most affected by systemic harm still face deep barriers. So, what issues do you see are most urgent for policymakers and advocates to take on next?
I think what we're seeing right now, it feels like something of the decade of the 80s. We're seeing a demonization of young people that when our political leaders listen to that and have the need to respond to a story or the loudest voices, what we end up with is mass incarceration. I remember when young people were described as predators, and what resulted from that was a set of policies that treated them inhumanely. What resulted from that was a bunch of policies that widened the net and brought more young people into the criminal legal system. And so I feel like right now we're at a time where we're hearing our elected officials and leaders, political leaders, talk about young people as if they are they're being demonized again. And I would encourage our elected leaders to take action because the loudest voices in our ecosystem is saying young people are bad people and they need to be treated as adults. And so we're seeing raise the age on attack, uh, trying to demonize young people when the facts just don't bear that out. The data doesn't bear that out. And so I am concerned that in these election cycles, leaders tend to want to have a soundbite be the solution to a complex problem. And so that is our biggest challenge right now, I think, as a city and as a state.
Yeah, you're perfectly right, Mr. Richards. Just speaking about that, you're right. So there's been this narrative being promoted that there's increasing crime, that this increasing crime is associated with young people, and this alleged association of crime with young people is attributed to the raise the age legislation. But as you just articulated, none of the facts support that. Outside of New York City, statewide, we've seen decreases in crime that cover the
Mhm.
interval in time in which raise the age will in effect go down and for serious crimes that can concern gun violence, physical violence, crime have gone down as well amongst the demographic. And in New
Mhm.
York City, the numbers are the same. And so, to your point, there's no evidence to support this idea that young people are committing crimes, and that is attributed to raised age. And this attack on raise age and quite frankly, young people is unwarranted, right? And so I agree with you as a director of policy who helps lead this challenge. That is probably one of our most important issues, and we're doing everything in our power to advocate against this false narrative that raise the age is actually bad for people. Again, there's no data to support it, and we're doing everything in our power. And there's just one thing that I want to highlight in reference to that. I think that our supporters that consist of lawyers, advocacy groups, affected people, we're doing everything in our power to combat that. We also know just from a from a public health and physical health perspective that incarcerating young people is not in the best interest of them, healthcare providers, the healthcare system, and society at large. And so we've made a concerted effort to push back against this false narrative that somehow raise the age is harmful to society as a whole. So I appreciate the perspective, and that's something that we need to continue to do going forward. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I also want to harken back to something we spoke about earlier concerning public safety. So, and this is really really important because with your experience, you have a great deal of have a deep analysis concerning this. So you've led inside the government and the community organizations. You've done both. As we enter the new legislative cycle, how do we define public safety, and how does it require us to practice it?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I think about public safety, I think about all the elements that go into public safety. When I think about the work that Fortune Society does, what we do is public safety because every person we help get a job, every person we get connected to recovery services, every person that is connected to a therapist or accesses our service that is no longer on the streets or is housed um, reduces the likelihood that they're going to re-engage in criminal activity. And so that is public safety. When we help people reunite with their family and provide supports through our food and nutrition program, through our alternatives to incarceration, our family reunification, our care management program, when we do those things, we increase the likelihood that people are going to remain in community and remain engaged. And so our work at Fortune and in other spaces is all about public safety. So when we think about public safety, it isn't just policing, arrest, prosecution, and prison. It is so much more than that. There is a prevention element. How do we keep so many people out of the system up front? What is it that we are missing in the communities most impacted by mass incarceration that we should be taking a look at and we should make investments in? We know that poverty and substance use and mental illness, when you look at the criminal legal system, a significant percentage of the people in the system have those particular challenges. How do we provide the resources and supports necessary that if those are the drivers to mass incarceration, we begin to fix that on the front end and we begin to tighten the safety net on the back end so when people come out. And so public safety is not just a statement, it is an action. It is an action that we all can take. City government, state government, federal government, local nonprofits, advocates, community members, community boards. We all should be thinking about public safety in a very dynamic and inclusive way. And at Fortune Society, that's what we advocate for, and that's what we do. Public safety is about doing, not just making a statement.
Thank you, Mr. Richard. Thank you, Mr. Richards. We appreciate that. And so, my last, we're kind of close up against time, but my last question for viewers, I want to ask you a very, very important question for the nation. What lessons do you hope that people in other states might glean from this conversation?
Well, as I said, New York is a place where we can do big things. And so my hope is that other states, and we've seen it throughout the country, where significant reform efforts happen, and we're seeing significant movement in those states. But to see that New York could reduce its footprint and close Rikers Island, when we close Rikers Island, that those who are incarcerated could be incarcerated and confined in humane conditions, where the officers who work there work in spaces that are dignified and humane, where we don't have to rely on mass incarceration as our only tool in the toolbox to deal with public safety. And that what we do here in New York becomes a blueprint for reform across this country. We've had many states visit the Netherlands and European prisons to learn lessons that they have learned. And one simple one that when I went and toured in Norway is that their fundamental belief is if a person is convicted of a crime and sent to prison, that the conditions of their confinement should never be part of their punishment. And when they are incarcerated, they don't lose their humanity and they don't lose their rights. Thirdly, the correction officer's role is not about care, custody, and control. It's about support, engagement, and reentry. And so in Norway, they call their officers contact officers because their job and their evaluation to how well of a job they do is that the people that's in their care, when they are released, they don't come back. And they built a whole system around making sure that that happens. And so there are lessons we can learn from our international partners, and there are lessons that this country can learn from New York City, and New York City can learn from other states as well.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. We appreciate that. That's very super duper important for us, everyone, to understand. And so I just want to say thank you for providing us with your insight, Mr. Richards. Thank you to the viewers for joining us for a thought provoking discussion. On behalf of the Fortune Society, we thank you so much for tuning into both sides of the bars. If you're interested in finding out more about the Fortune Society, please check us out on the web at thefortunesociety.org. That is thefortunesociety.org, or on Facebook by typing the Fortune Society. This is Reggie Chapman, and I appreciate you for joining us as we critically look at both sides of the bars. Thank you.